Today, there are fewer than 15 Sears stores remaining in the United States, and honestly, if you walked into one of them, you might wish you hadn't. The shelves are half empty, scattered with random merchandise that looks like it was pulled from a time capsule. The lighting is dim, the carpets are stained. It feels less like a store and more like a wake for a deceased relative. It is a humiliating end for a company that, as recently as the 1970s, wasn't just a store. It was the heartbeat of the American economy. In fact, just a few decades ago, Sears was the largest retailer on the planet. It was bigger than Walmart. It was bigger than Amazon. For millions of American families, Sears was the only store that mattered. It was where you bought your house, your car insurance, your clothes, your refrigerator, and your tools. It was where you got your eyes checked and your portrait taken. It was an empire so vast that at one point, 1% of the entire gross national product of the United States flowed through Sears cash registers. Join me as we take a trip back in time, before the empty parking lots and the liquidation signs, back to the days of the wish book, the die-hard battery, and the smell of roasting nuts at the candy counter. We are going to revisit the rise and fall of the company that built the American middle class and then threw it all away. The story of Sears doesn't begin in a mall. It begins with a shipment of watches. The year was 1886. A young railroad station agent in North Redwood, Minnesota, named Richard W. Sears, found himself with a problem. A local jeweler had refused a shipment of gold-filled pocket watches. Sears, seeing an opportunity, bought the shipment himself and started selling them to other station agents up and down the rail line. He sold them for a profit, and just like that, the R.W. Sears Watch Company was born. Richard Sears was a marketing genius. He understood something that nobody else did: the power of writing directly to the customer. He moved to Chicago and hired a watch repairman named Alva C. Roebuck. In 1893, they officially renamed the company Sears, Roebuck & Company. But the real revolution wasn't the watches. It was the book. In the late 1800s, rural America, farmers, settlers, people living miles from the nearest town, were at the mercy of the local general store. Prices were high, credit was tight, and selection was terrible. Richard Sears looked at this and saw an opening. He created a catalog. It started small, but by 1895, the Sears catalog was 532 pages. It was known as the Consumer's Bible. It was printed on cheap newsprint, but to the families on the prairie, it was gold. You could buy everything, and I mean everything. You could buy a Stradivarius violin. You could buy a 12-gauge shotgun. You could buy a cream separator for your dairy cows. You could buy a tombstone for your grandfather. And the prices? They were unbeatable. Sears was the original Amazon. He built a massive distribution center in Chicago, the largest business building in the world at the time, where gravity chutes and conveyor belts moved packages with military precision. An order would come in by mail, and within days the product was on a train headed to your doorstep. By 1908, the catalog had grown so powerful that you could open it to page 1,500 and buy a house. A Sears Modern Home. It wasn't a model, it was a kit. 30,000 pieces. Lumber, nails, paint, shingles, plumbing, all shipped in a boxcar. You picked it up at the depot and built it yourself. Between 1908 and 1940, Sears sold over 70,000 of these houses. People are still living in them today. They are high-quality, sturdy homes, a testament to a time when a mail-order company built things to last forever. As the 20th century rolled on, America changed. The Model T Ford allowed farmers to drive to the city. The population moved from the country to the suburbs. General Robert E. Wood, who took over Sears in the 1920s, saw this coming. He realized that the catalog wasn't enough. Sears needed stores. In 1925, Sears opened its first retail store in Chicago. It was a massive success. They expanded rapidly. By the 1950s and 60s, the Sears store was the anchor of the new American phenomenon, the shopping mall. This was the golden age. If you grew up in the 70s or 80s, you remember the Sears experience. It was sensory. You entered through the mall entrance, and you were hit with the smell of the candy counter, the hot cashews, and the Swedish fish. You rode the escalator through the women's fashion department, past the racks of Toughskins jeans, the ones with the reinforced knees that were indestructible and arguably uncool, but every mom bought them. Down in the basement, or out in the auto center, was the male sanctuary. This was the home of Craftsman. For decades, Craftsman tools were the gold standard. They came with a lifetime guarantee that actually meant something. If your ratchet broke in 1975, you brought it back in 1995, and the guy behind the counter handed you a new one. No receipt, no questions. It was a bond of trust between a man and a corporation. Move over to appliances, and you found Kenmore. These machines were tanks. A Kenmore washing machine bought in 1978 would probably still be running today if you hadn't finally upgraded it for color. They didn't break. They were built with the assumption that you would have them for 20 years. And then there was the Wish Book. Released every year around August or September, the Sears Christmas catalog was the event of the season for American children. It was 600 pages of pure desire. Kids would lie on the living room floor for hours, circling the toys they wanted with a red marker. The G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, the Barbie dream house, the Atari 2600. It wasn't just a catalog. It was a roadmap to happiness. In 1973, to symbolize their dominance, Sears built a headquarters in Chicago. But they didn't just build an office building, they built the Sears Tower. 110 stories, the tallest building in the world. It towered over the skyline, a black steel monolith that said to the world, "We are untouchable. We are the kings of commerce." But irony is a cruel thing. The moment they finished the tower was arguably the moment the rot began. The executives in the high tower began to lose touch with the store on the ground. In the 1980s, Sears decided that being a retailer wasn't enough. They wanted to be a financial empire. They bought a real estate company, Coldwell Banker. They bought a stock brokerage, Dean Witter Reynolds. They launched their own credit card, the Discover Card. They started selling insurance through Allstate, setting up booths right next to the lawnmowers. The strategy was called socks and stocks. Ideally, a customer would come in to buy a pair of tube socks and leave with a new mortgage. It sounds ridiculous now, but at the time, Sears truly believing they could be the center of your entire financial life. They wanted to own your car, your house, your insurance policy, and the clothes on your back. But in chasing this Wall Street dream, they forgot the smell of the popcorn. They forgot the guy coming in for a drill bit. They forgot the mom looking for school clothes. The confusion diluted the brand. The stores, once the pride of the neighborhood, started to look neglected. The carpets got dirty, the displays got dusty, and while Sears was playing Wall Street, its competitors were sharpening their knives. On the low end, a guy named Sam Walton was building an empire in Arkansas. Walmart wasn't trying to sell you stocks. They were trying to sell you toilet paper cheaper than anyone else on earth. Their stores were bright, their logistics were state-of-the-art, and they ate Sears lunch in the rural towns that the catalog had once dominated. On the high end, Target was making discount shopping feel trendy. Target became the place for the middle class who wanted design with their value. In the darker corners, category killers were emerging. Home Depot took the tool guys who used to worship at the altar of Craftsman. Best Buy took the appliance guys who used to swear by Kenmore. Toys R Us took the kids who used to live for the Wish Book. Sears was being picked apart, department by department. The everything store was suddenly the nothing store. It was a place you went only if you absolutely had to. And then came the fatal errors. The decisions that didn't just hurt the company, but killed it. In 1993, Sears made what business historians often call the single biggest mistake in the history of retail. They looked at their massive catalog division, the one Richard Sears had started, the one with the massive distribution network and the customer list of millions, and they decided it was losing money. It was old-fashioned, so they shut it down. They fired the logistics experts. They closed the distribution centers. They shredded the mailing lists. This was 1993. I want you to pause and think about that year. The internet was just starting to flicker to life. Dial-up modems were screeching in dens across America. 1 year later, in 1994, Jeff Bezos founded Amazon. Sears had the infrastructure to be Amazon before Amazon existed. They had the warehouses. They had the trucks. They had the trust. They had the behavior. People were already used to ordering from Sears and having it show up at their door. If they had simply moved the catalog online, Sears.com could have been the default way we shop today. We wouldn't be living in the age of Amazon. we'd be living in the age of Sears. But they threw it all away because the executives in the tower wanted to focus on selling clothes in dusty malls. They chose the past over the future. The final nail in the coffin was the merger with Kmart in 2005. It was engineered by a hedge fund manager named Eddie Lampert. The idea was that combining two struggling giants would create one strong one. Instead, it was like tying two rocks together to see if they would float. Under Lampert's leadership, the company was stripped for parts. It became less of a retailer and more of a real estate holding company. The goal wasn't to sell merchandise, it was to extract value from the land the stores sat on. Key assets were sold off like organs from a dying body. The legendary Craftsman brand, the soul of the company, was sold to Black & Decker for roughly $900 million. The real estate was sold. The stores were starved of cash. The shopping experience became a tragic joke. The roofs leaked and buckets were placed in the aisles. The escalators broke and were simply roped off. The employees, demoralized and understaffed, watched as their loyal customers walked out the door and never came back. It was a slow, painful death, played out in public view in every town in America. In 2018, Sears filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was the end of an era. The liquidation sales began. Everything must go, and it was heartbreaking. You saw older folks walking through the gutted stores, looking at the empty shelves, essentially saying goodbye to a friend they had known their whole lives. Today, the Sears Tower is called the Willis Tower, though no true Chicagoan calls it that. The catalog is a collector's item on eBay, a relic of a time when we circled toys with markers instead of clicking Add to Cart. The Craftsman tools at Lowe's are made in China, trading on the ghost of a reputation built in American basements. What we lost wasn't just a store, we lost a shared language. Whether you lived in Maine or California, you knew what the wish book was. You knew what Die Hard meant. You knew the smell of the popcorn. Sears was the rare thing that connected the farmer to the banker to the factory worker. It was the great equalizer of consumption. It's a cautionary tale. It teaches us that no matter how big you are, no matter if you build the tallest tower in the world, you are only as good as your connection to your customer. Sears stopped listening. They stopped innovating. They stopped caring about the wrench and started caring about the stock price. And in the brutal world of retail, if you stop moving forward, you become history. Today, those few remaining Sears stores stand as lonely monuments to a lost age. Ghost ships drifting in a sea of asphalt. Their parking lots empty. Their signs faded. But for those of us who remember, who can still feel the weight of a Craftsman wrench or the glossy paper of the Christmas catalog, the lights will never truly go out. Farewell, Sears. You were the everything store before we knew what that meant, and we miss you.